Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. I am your host, Mindy. A friend of mine told me in early 2018 that she saw a vision of me with a microphone in front of me. I laughed at the time and said, "I don't see any microphones in my future." Less than a year later, I was recording my first podcast on this show. I'm not going to say, "I hope you enjoy this podcast." My podcast is not truly meant to be enjoyed. Real grief, real healing is just that, real and raw. I provide you an opportunity to learn and share in the grief others are experiencing, and then we share how they are healing or perhaps not. Grief changes each of us in some way. Many of my guests have been encouraged to open new businesses, start foundations, and in general, work to make the world around us a better place. Grief is universal. How we decide to move onward, seeking healing, is individual. A significant part of my healing comes through the courageous kindness actions of others. As you listen to my podcasts, you will hear how you can give and receive courageous kindness too. Together, we are better.
Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan, taking a deep dive into the reality of the difficulty grief brings and offering insight into the healing available to each of us. Today, episode 34, Goals and Dreams Exterminated, Find Hope in Sharing. And now your host, Mindy Corporan.
Hi friends, it's Mindy Corporan with Real Grief, Real Healing. I hope you are well today. Thanks so much for joining this episode. And what we're going to be talking about today is a little bit of my past, which you hear about often, and then what's going on currently in my friend Jacqueline's life. So to give this some context for you all, I'm going to be reading from my memoir, Healing a Shattered Soul. I am going to be reading just an excerpt from page 235, where I introduce Jacqueline and her husband, JB, and how they entered our lives. So let me allow some context, and then I'm going to introduce Jacqueline Murekatete. Having Dad, Reet, and Terry honored along with our families meant a great deal to us. We were thankful for the opportunity to meet other honorees, such as Jacqueline Murekatete, founder of the nonprofit Genocide Survivors Foundation. At the age of 9, she lost her entire immediate family and most of her extended family in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. She has since become a lawyer, married, and is a mother of 2. Meeting Jacqueline and her husband was a highlight for all of us, especially Lucas. We were in need of something or someone to help engage in any planned activity. JB, Jacqueline's husband, was fond of Lucas. Over dinner, I could see Lucas coming out of his angered stance and opening up to their personal story. Lucas had lost his grandfather and brother, a horrible tragedy. He now listened to Jacqueline and JB tell of all the people they lost during the Rwandan genocide. Incomprehensible. Knowing he was not alone in grieving his own family members, Lucas connected with both of them immediately. Friends, I want to tell you on our journey, there were people who came in and out of our lives, and I am so thankful that Jacqueline and JB have stayed in our lives. And I welcome Jacqueline Murekatete to Real Grief, Real Healing. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi, Mindy. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. Can you tell us, where are you today? Where are you while we're talking to you? And tell us about your being a mom of 2 now and your family situation.
I'm good. I'm still living here in New York City. I recently gave birth to a baby boy who's now almost 5 months. He's going to be 5 months this Sunday, on Mother's Day, actually. And so I've been enjoying him as well as his older sister, my daughter, Ineza, who's 4 years old. So I'm a mother of two, as you said. I work as a lawyer. I've been on maternity leave for the past, couple months. And I am also still running my nonprofit organization called the Genocide Survivors Foundation, continuing to spread awareness about the crime of genocide and fighting hate, and trying to get people to start doing more to fight hate and to create a world where there's a respect for the basic rights of all human beings. So I'm good. I mean, obviously, we've all been dealing with this pandemic. So it's been a difficult a year, more than a year now. So I'm mindful that the world is not, not everything is good. There's so much things going on. There are a lot of difficulties. There's been a lot of suffering in the past, several months in this country and around the world. So I'm mindful of all that. But I can say that I'm really grateful that I'm healthy and my family is healthy and I'm able to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. I am grateful as well. I really do get quite giddy anytime I see you speak or hear about what you're doing. I follow you on social media. I was pleased that you accepted my invitation to share today. I know your story. I've heard your story live. I've read your story. And I would like it if you would share however you want to share your experience of the Rwandan genocide with our listeners.
Yeah, so, the 1994 genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda took place between the month of April and July of 1994. So currently, we're actually in a commemorative period. Every April, between April and July, we observe the 100 days of commemoration. The genocide lasted for approximately 100 days. And in those 100 days, over a million people were systematically murdered. So the killings were very, very efficient. And the killings were efficient because, like any other genocide, one thing I always say about genocide, it's not a crime that happens overnight. People don't get up and they want to murder their neighbors. Genocide is planned. So before the actual killing, there was a lot of dehumanization of ethnic Tutsis, my ethnic group, and the minority ethnic group in Rwanda. There was a lot of dehumanization campaign in which Tutsis, my ethnic group, was portrayed as, non-human, as snakes, as cockroaches that needed to be exterminated. Machetes and other weapons that were used to carry out the genocide were imported to Rwanda years before the actual killings began. There was a list of Tutsis, particularly prominent Tutsis, who were going to be murdered first. There was a lot of indoctrination of the Hutu population, Hutus being the majority ethnic group in Rwanda, particularly indoctrination of Hutu youth, where again, the Hutu extremist government portrayed Tutsis, my people, as non-Rwandans, as foreigners, as people who did not deserve rights, and as I said, in the end, not as people, period, as non-humans, as cockroaches are needed to be exterminated. So because of that systematic planning, when the actual killings began on the night of April 6, 1994, they were very efficient. And that's why within 100 days, over a million people was murdered. And among the over a million people murdered, as you said, was my entire immediate family. My father, my mother, my two sisters, and my four brothers. And also my two grandmothers, a number of aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, really not only my immediate family, but as you said, a large part of my extended family were murdered in those 100 days. So I went from being a child of 9 with parents, with goals and dreams, surrounded by people who loved me, who encouraged me, to finding myself in an environment where I was hunted like an animal every day and every night. where my family, members of the Tutsi ethnic group throughout the country were hunted and were targeted for extermination. And I found myself in a situation where, as a child, I had to watch as innocent men, women, and children were murdered around me, and where I lived each day, never knowing whether I was going to live to see the next day. But I survived. And after surviving, I learned that my entire family had been murdered. And as I'm sure we'll discuss, it was a very difficult reality for me to cope with and to deal with and to really start trying to find a way to move forward. So it's been over 27 years now. This April, we mark the 27th anniversary of the genocide. And, the journey of healing, as you yourself know, is a long one. It's never complete, in my opinion. But, I'm here today doing the work that I'm doing with Genocide Survivors Foundation, because I truly believe that one of the reasons that I survived is so that I can tell the story of what happened in Rwanda in 1994. And more generally, I can raise awareness about the crime of genocide and how, despite the never again that was said after the Holocaust and after the genocides that followed the Holocaust, including the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, this is a crime that remains, in my opinion, one of the major threats facing humanity. Because even today, we live in a world where many ethnic and religious minorities live in a danger of extermination. We live in a world where some people have ideology of genocide, where people believe that certain groups of people should not exist, that they should be targeted for extermination. And for me, as a survivor of genocide, as somebody who lost so much to the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, I really believe that one of the reasons I survived is to speak about that and to try to get the word out and try to get more people involved in stopping this crime from continuing to happen, in actually saying never again, and actually putting, not just in words, but actually in actions, making sure that never again is just not empty words, but we're actually doing something to stop this. Because personally, I always say that it boggles my mind to believe that in this day and age, there's still people who believe that certain people do not deserve to live. You know, we all have a God-given right, I believe, to be here. And for people to be allowed to carry out systematic murder of any group of people is something to me that should not be happening in this day and age.
Jacqueline, thank you for the ability to talk about this. I know that you need strength to be able to retell your story, and I appreciate and value your time and your heart in giving us that, I know, very shortened summary of what happened. But I want to take what you were just ending with. I want to take that and ask you a question in your role right now with the Genocide Survivors Foundation. Tell me, where are you specifically seeing a high concern and reality of genocide? Because listeners might be thinking, well, she's talking about what happened, 27 years ago. And even though you said you're concerned, they might not know where it's happening. Can you point us in a direction with some content on where you have high concerns of current genocide potentially occurring or occurring?
Yeah, I mean, I can give, as I mentioned, there are a number of, religious and ethnic minorities that live under the constant threat of extermination in many parts of the world. But currently, I can give, two examples where, actual killings have been going on. One is in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, where I've been posting, about this action on my social media, on my Facebook page, which is under my name, Jacqueline Murekatete, and on Twitter, about the killing of Banyamulenge people. Banyamulenge is an ethnic group that is based in eastern DRC, in southern actually. And they are actually similar to Tutsis, my ethnic group. In fact, when they are killed, every time they are targeted for extermination, it's by people who are always saying they're not real Congolese, they are Rwandans or they are Burundians. So they are considered foreigners in their own country, which is really what the genocide ideology is. It's to portray people not as true inhabitants, true citizens with the same rights, but as foreigners. Even in Rwanda, Tutsis were said to have come from Ethiopia, migrated from Ethiopia, and they were never considered as true Rwandans. In fact, when Tutsis were being killed in 1994, the people were saying, we're going to kill them, we're going to throw their bodies in the river, in the Nyabarongo River, which is going to send them back to Ethiopia. So this idea of portraying people, we've seen a lot of that even in our country. It's, xenophobia, saying some people, they are foreigners, they don't belong, they need to go back. This is what's been happening for many years with the Banyamulenge people in DRC. So right now, actually this past month in April, there were a number of killings, and a lot of them have been displaced from their homes. They're in refugee camps. Killings are still going on, and they're being targeted simply because they are Banyamulenge people. The other example I can give is, I think more people may have heard about what has been going on in Myanmar or in Burma. Some people call it Myanmar, some people call the country Burma, but the systematic murder of the Rohingya people. There have been a lot of murder, a lot of rape, a lot of displacement. There's a large number of refugees who have fled to Bangladesh. So just those two examples, Banyamulenge people in DRC and the Rohingya people in Burma are just two examples of ethnic and religious minority who are being targeted simply because of who they are. And this is what genocide is. I always tell people it's the worst crime that human beings can commit, because you are being killed not because of what you have done, but simply because of who you are, simply because of something that you did not have a choice in being. As you know, I mean, we are all born where we are born, in whatever ethnic group, whatever religion, whatever economic background. We don't have a choice in that. And to be targeted for an extermination because of who you are, to me, is no worse crime. And as I said, it really troubles me deeply that in this day and age, despite all the progress that we as a human race have enjoyed, that this is still happens on our watch. And what it arises from, as you know, is hate, it's intolerance, is again that belief that some people don't deserve to live. And it is that kind of ideology that I spend, every day of my life trying to fight, help people to realize that all of us have the same God-given right to exist. This is a basic right that should be respected, and teaching respect and tolerance, as I know you yourself do through your work.
I love that you said we have a God-given right to exist, because there's always so much conversation amongst Americans in the United States about, what our rights are and what our rights are not. And the simplest right is to exist when you get it to the bare bones, so to speak. And then that is even being taken away from people. And that is a very harsh reality.
Yeah, for me, on some level, I don't understand it. I live in America now. I live in New York City, as I mentioned, the most diverse city in the United States. I always say this is a little sample of the world, because you meet people from all types of religious background, economic background, ethnic background, and for me, I value that. I value the diversity. The Holocaust survivor, one of the how I ended up speaking. Obviously, I didn't tell my whole story, but how I ended up sharing my story was after meeting a Holocaust survivor who came to my classroom when I was a high school student and shared his story. And one of the things that he always said that we need to help people understand that diversity is not adversity. Human diversity is something that we should see as an asset to be embraced and to learn from, not as something that which should be used to pin us against one another, or not as something that should be a negative. It's a positive. And I always say, for me, living. That's why I'm always saying, like, I'm very happy to be raising my children. As I said, 4 years old, and now the other one is almost 5 months in a place like this, because I want them to grow up realizing that there is diversity in our world, diversity in color, diversity in religion, there are all kinds of human rights diversity. But this is something that should be embraced. That when they see people being picked on, when they see people being dehumanized or being targeted simply because of who they are, they need to speak up. But there are some people who live in such, isolated places, or who choose to be isolated even when they live in a very diverse communities. And that's why it becomes very easy for people to come and say, okay, Jews are this way, Muslims are this way, Hindus are this way, Tutsis are this way. And it's so the importance of really getting out of our comfort zone is something that I speak about too. Like getting to know other religions, which I know is something that you do a lot of, with your 7 days, inviting different religious faiths, giving them a platform to talk about who they are. I think a lot of this happens because of ignorance and stereotypes, which arises out of ignorance. But again, I think really part of my work is helping people realize that diversity is not adversity, as David used to say. And I speak a lot to young people. I go into schools, as you know, high schools, colleges, trying to create a world where when these young people are in positions of power, that they will use, their positions to speak out and to do something when people are being dehumanized or targeted or being made to look lesser than, other human beings. But again, it troubles me. I don't understand it to some level, but at the same time, I have accepted that this is a reality that we live in. That some people just feel that way, and we need to try and educate them, and we need to try to really increase awareness and appreciation for diversity.
Thank you. Diversity is not adversity. And I want to go back to you talking about David and remind our listeners that when you were 9 years old, when you lost your family members and extended family and friends. And can you give us an explanation of how you were rescued and you and a cousin were rescued, and then give us that piece of the story, and then tell us a little bit more about David and how you met David and started speaking with him.
Yeah. So, when the genocide happened, I actually happened to be with my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, in a village that was a couple hours away from my parents, where my parents were living. And I spent a lot of my childhood with my grandmother because when I was born, actually, the sister who came after me, I was one of seven, as I mentioned, one of seven children. And the sister my mother had my sister right after she had me. So my grandmother kind of took on the role of helping her. So I spent a lot of my childhood with my grandmother, who was like my second mother. And when the genocide happened, I was with her. And one of the first things that the Hutu extremist government did when the genocide started was put roadblocks throughout Rwanda to make sure that even those Tutsis who had the means to flee uh, were not able to do so. So early on in the genocide, I could no longer go back to my parents' village. And my parents could no longer come to my grandmother's village. And when the killings began in my grandmother's village, I ran away with her. My story of survival is a long one, and that's actually, for those who want to learn more about my full story, they can find my story on YouTube by putting in my name, and something that I also hope to hopefully write about. But we initially ran away in what would be an equivalent of a district office or mayor's office because we thought we would be protected. We were soon attacked, and there I witnessed many killings of many members of my family, particularly from my mother's side of the family, because many of them lived in that area. And then after that, I found myself with my grandmother and my cousin being hidden by a Hutu family who had agreed to hide us. And it's always important for me to talk about that there were Hutus during the genocide who stood up and tried to do the right thing. Just like you had the righteous Gentiles during the Holocaust, and you had other people who stood up during other genocides. There were always few people who say, the government is saying, kill your neighbor. My neighbors are going out and killing our neighbors, but I'm going to do the right thing. So this Hutu family was one of the few who were doing the right thing, and they hid us for a few days until we were found out and we were attacked and were nearly killed. And I'm skipping a lot of details, of course, because I know time is, we don't have a lot of time. But soon after that, I found myself in an orphanage that was managed and owned by two Italian priests who had come to Rwanda prior to the genocide and set up this orphanage and used to take children whose parents had died of natural causes. And when the genocide started, these two Italian priests were also among the few foreigners. And I say the few foreigners because when the genocide began, all the foreigners who had been in Rwanda left. They were evacuated by the embassies. So the Americans and the Belgians and the French, they all left. And this is why when people say they didn't know the genocide was happening, it's a lie. They knew that was happening. They came and the embassies evacuated their people and they left, Tutsis to die. But these two Italian priests were among, the righteous people, the upstanders who said, we're not going to abandon these children. In fact, we're going to start welcoming other children who are coming here because their parents have been murdered in the genocide. So I found a refuge in that orphanage. Even in that orphanage, there were many, many nights and days where we were attacked and told that we were going to be killed. And each time those attacks happened, we thought we were going to be killed. And, when I tell my story, I always say that it's a miracle that I and other survivors survived, because every day for those 100 days, we were targeted for extermination. But the priests will use bribes and other means to try and protect us. And thankfully, although the circumstances were uncertain and difficult, we survived. And myself and a couple hundred other children survived in that orphanage. After the genocide, as I mentioned, I learned my family had been murdered. It was a very, very difficult time for me, as you can imagine. I spent many nights thinking that this was a nightmare that I was going to wake up from. But I was very lucky in that I had an uncle who, at the time, was living in the US. After finding out that I had survived, he adopted me. He brought me here. And it wasn't until I was a sophomore in high school that I started speaking. And that's after I met David, as I mentioned, a Holocaust survivor who came to my classroom after we read the book Night by Elie Wiesel. And David shared his story of surviving the Holocaust as a child. And at that time, I was in a place, initially, after surviving the genocide, I didn't want to talk about my experience. I didn't want to share it. I didn't want to talk about it. I was myself still struggling to understand how it is that one day I was a child with family, with goals and dreams. And in the middle of 100 days, I was a traumatized orphan without any sense of what my future was going to be. But when I met David in 2001, I was at a point where I felt like the time had come to start speaking about what happened, because I realized that my classmates, who were all 16 at that time, had no idea about the genocide. They didn't even know where Rwanda was. So I felt that, as a sole survivor in my family, I had to talk about how they had died. I had to talk about the genocide and the over 1 million people. I felt that it was one of the reasons that I survived. So my meeting with David was really timely in many ways. And he was at that time going around in schools and speaking, and he encouraged me. And I started speaking with him. So between 2001, when I met him, and 2012, when he passed away, him and I spent countless hours on the road speaking to many parts of this country, going to high schools, middle schools, churches, synagogues. We came, as you know, I later came to speak at 7 days. And, our message was always the same: to really help people understand the dangers of hate, the dangers of intolerance, the dangers of anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, all forms of extremism, that when these things go unchecked, they can lead, as you yourself know, to murder. And to, sometimes systematic murder, to genocide, and the need for us to really start learning and becoming more respectful of diversity, and getting out of, again, our comfort zone, and learning to appreciate diversity. So that's a work that David and I started together. And, when he passed away in 2012, I remember I told him that, I'll continue this work for as long as I live, because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I really do feel that it's one of the reasons that I survived. As you all know, like, when things like this happen, it's, at least, for genocide survivors, we always say, why me? Why did I survive? Why did I survive? I always think about, now as a mother, I think a lot about, my younger siblings. When my family was killed, my younger sibling was just a couple months old, just like my son now. And I always say, like, why not him? Why not the 2-year-old? Why not the 3-year-old? Like, they didn't even know that they were Tutsis. They didn't know their names, but they were, they were murdered. And I said, why me? And at a certain point, I had to accept that I'm here. And part of the reason I'm here is to tell the story of what happened and to hopefully, again, do my part in creating a world where there's more respect for diversity and there's more understanding and there's more realization that, at the end of the day, we're all human beings who deserve the same rights to exist and to pursue our goals and dreams.
Jacqueline, you are so valuable. You're such a treasure. I look back at when we met you and how blessed we were to meet you and JB in the moment that we did at the Anti-Defamation League event in Washington, D.C., October of 2014. And the fact that you felt the responsibility to carry on the legacy of your family and your ethnicity, the Tutsis, just, you're a treasure. And I know that you would rather have your family back and not have gone through everything. I know all of that, but I want you to, I would say, I want you to know that you are a treasure. I would like to ask you to help us understand where we can learn more. You mentioned your YouTube. I will put that in the show notes. And I am smiling at the fact that you are now either writing or maybe considering writing your story. I think that is amazing. Where else can we learn about what happened? What's a good resource for us to learn about what happened in Rwanda to understand that it was real, that you lived it, and then and give us some actionable ideas on how to help you with your foundation, Genocide Survivors Foundation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Mindy, also for the work that you're doing. I know you're one of the people that I'm really blessed to have in my life. I believe that certain people come to my life for a reason, and I believe that there's a good reason that we met. And I know that we share the passion, for social justice and for equality and for world where again, there's more tolerance and more respect. So I want to really acknowledge and thank you for the work that you are doing with your 7 days and now with your memoir and with your speaking tours, because not everybody is able to rise above what you went through, the tragedy that you went through after losing your father and your son. Not everybody is able to do the work that you're doing now. It's very easy to be paralyzed by it and to be bitter and angry about it, as all of us are obviously susceptible to. But the fact that I appreciate that we're in the same boat. Both of us decided that we're going to use our tragedy to hopefully raise awareness and to create a better world for other people and hopefully prevent this type of violence, hate motivated violence from continuing to happen. But to learn more about the genocide against the Tutsi, I would direct people to the Kigali Genocide Memorial. They have a website. So Kigali is the capital of Rwanda. It's Kigali. Kigali Genocide Memorial is a good resource. Aegis Trust also has a website that has a lot of information about the genocide. And finally, there's an organization, actually an institute called the Commission CNLG, or the National Commission Against Genocide. So if the people put in CNLG Rwanda, just the acronym CNLG, they have a lot of history about how the genocide happened, how it was perpetrated, and how Rwanda is today. And Rwanda has made amazing progress. 25 years, 27 years after the genocide, it's a country that people can visit now. It's a secure country, but there's also a lot of challenges. I work with survivors. The mission of Genocide Survivors Foundation, in addition to educating people about the crime of genocide, the second part of our mission is actually providing support or services, comprehensive services to genocide survivors. And 27 years later, there are many survivors who are still dealing with a lot of challenges, from lack of access to education, lack of proper housing. A lot of them who were victims of rape and were infected with HIV are in need of all kinds of medical needs. There's a lot of need for medical needs. There's a lot of need in terms of trauma healing and mental health. So that's some of the areas where we work. Part of our work as Genocide Survivors Foundation is actually raising money and trying to partner with survivors organization on the ground to be able to deliver services and support to these most vulnerable survivors. So to learn more about the work that I do with survivors, I encourage people to visit genocidesurvivorsfoundation.org. Obviously, there are many ways they can support us financially. You can donate to our organization. I'm a public speaker, as you said, and part of the things, part of the actionable item I was list is to have people invite me to, to their schools, to their church, to their synagogue, where I can share my story and my work. We always encourage people to, of course, do fundraising events for us, because to be able to do the work that we are doing, whether in terms of going to schools and carrying out this education work or supporting survivors on the ground in Rwanda, we always need of financial support. So I encourage people to visit our website and to get involved. And when I speak to people, I always say that it's very hard to get overwhelmed with some of the many of the injustices that exist in the world. But I always say to everybody that I speak to, please, don't be paralyzed by it. Find something that you're passionate about, whether it's fighting hate, whether it's fighting hunger, whether it's fighting, whether it's women economic empowerment. Find something you're passionate about and do it. Because I think that if all of us were living lives that are beyond ourselves and trying to make a difference, a positive difference in the world, then our world will be in much better shape.
Thank you. You are exactly accurate. We share the same passion. And I appreciate your thoughts about my work, and that, you encouraged me in 2014 and you continue to do so. And I'm very grateful and thankful that I inspire you as well. So I am so excited. At some point, we will see you again. I will get to give you a big hug and see those beautiful children of yours. And I know Lucas is so excited. He values you all and considers you all part of our family. And Lynn and my mom do as well. You and I absolutely share a passion. Thank you so much for being on Real Grief, Real Healing.
Thank you for having me.
Friends, I will tell you that, as I said, Jacqueline and I share a passion. And what I would ask of you is to do exactly what she said. Consider, what is your passion? Where are you passionate? And take action and help others, because that will help all of us. And together we are better. Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for this podcast of Real Grief, Real Healing with Mindy Corporan. If you want to dive deeper into how you might heal yourself or a friend, please pick up a copy of my book, Healing a Shattered Soul. Published on May 3rd, 2021, you can find my memoir anywhere books are sold. You will also find me in social media channels as Mindy Corporan. Take time to help yourself heal. Accepting courageous kindness. Take time to heal another by giving courageous kindness. Together, we are better.
Real Grief, Real Healing is copyright 2021 to 2022, Mindy Corporan, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. This podcast is a production of 818 Studios.